So the 2025 Ibex 450 is back up on the lift, but it's for a good reason this time. We are finally past that 600 mile or 1,000 kilometer break-in period, and we've got some work to do to make sure it's safe to go back out on the road. The handy dandy owner's manual or the service manual will walk you through the process as to what's needed. There are roughly 7 things we have to go through, so stay tuned. Do want to add that this video is for entertainment purposes only. If you are not comfortable turning a wrench on your bike, please take it to a dealership to do so. It will cost you about $300+ to do this service. I am not a CFMoto certified mechanic. I am not even a certified mechanic. I am just a guy in a garage who has lots of motorcycles trying to help you figure out if you want to do the service yourself or take it to your dealer to do it. And just for good measure, I am not held liable for any of the things that might happen to your bike or you if you were to do these services yourself. The first portion of this service is probably the one that makes the most sense. You got to change the oil and the filter. We are going to be replacing the filter. I have a high flow 682 filter that is not the OEM. It is an OEM replacement. You can always get the CFMoto one directly from your dealership, and you need 2.6 liters of oil. You will need some type of a catch can for the oil that you're draining out. Obviously you need the oil, you need the filter, a funnel to help put the oil back in. I have an impact driver just to take the bolts off of the skid plate. You do need a couple different size sockets, and then an oil filter wrench because that OEM filter is probably on pretty tight and you might not be able to use your hands to get it off. Quick thing to note, you do want the engine oil to be settled in the bottom of the engine, so if you've been riding recently, you want to make sure that has time to cool down and have the oil end up the bottom of the engine. You do want to do this with the bike vertical. I do like to use a fairly clean drain pan just so I can see what the oil comes out looking like. Part of the reason we do the oil change at 600 miles is so that we can get all the contaminants out that happen during those first 600 miles. All the bearings are going to be breaking in, the valves will be seating, so there might be some metal particulates that come out in the oil. If you see that the oil is sparkly, that's usually okay. It's when you see chunks of metal, large pieces of bronze, that's when you need to be concerned. You may see online that they reference a secondary filter or a screen on this bike. There isn't one, but what you do need to look at is your drain bolt itself. This has a magnet on it, so there will be metal pieces that are attached to this. Again, small pieces are fine, that's normal, but you don't want to see chunks. Make sure you take the drain bolt and you look at it, and then obviously before you put it back in, you clean it, get all the additional metal off of that so the magnet's clean for the next time you need it. So what we don't want to see is like swirls of glittery stuff or chunks floating. So this is a good sign that I'm not seeing anything like that. I feel like the break-in has gone well and the oil is fairly clear. I'm going to let this continue to drain, but I also want to point out this copper washer right here that's on the drain bolt. This copper washer is a crush washer. You should replace this every time you replace your oil. If you pull the bolt out, you should replace this. I sometimes will flip it around and use it twice before replacing it, but it's definitely a good thing to do. While that's going through the process of draining, I want to throw it out there that Iron Supply in Katy, Texas was a fantastic dealership to work with when I bought this bike. They've been awesome, they've been helpful, but I want to throw it out there too that I work on all kinds of motorcycles. I make content on sport bikes, street bikes, dirt bikes, e-motos, whatever, anything on 2 wheels. So if you like that kind of stuff, feel free to subscribe to the channel. I forgot to mention a torque wrench. You do need a torque wrench when you're doing these services. The drain bolt goes back in once it's done draining, and it gets torqued down to 18.4 foot-pounds, which really isn't that much. I'm going to take off this side cover with these 5mm bolts, not because I need to, but just so I can get you a better camera angle on the filter itself. Move the drain pan underneath the filter, grab your filter wrench, make sure it's going in the right direction, and twist it off. Let that oil drain out a bit. That was lucky. It is a good idea to wipe out the base just to get all the extra oil out. We want to be sure that the O-ring stays on the old filter and we only have one O-ring on the new filter. I do like to take oil. You can take some that's dripping out and put it on the O-ring itself. You do not need to fill it. Some people, old school mechanics, will tell you you need to fill it. It's okay, you don't. And then we simply screw it on. Do not use the wrench to put this back on. We just want this to be hand tight. Now we can refill it. Filling should be pretty self-explanatory. Take the filler cap off, keep that clean. There is an O-ring on that. If it's dirty like this one is right now, I will definitely clean that before I put it back on. I like to wipe down the outside edge as well, make sure that nothing gets into the engine. This bike does get ridden off-road after all. Put your funnel in, and then fill with 2.6 quarts of your favorite oil. I like 10W40 semi-synthetic. I've had good luck with it in the past. It does say that you can run other weights depending on which temperature you're riding in. Many modern bikes have this sight glass on the side of the engine. I'll try to zoom in and show you. You can see how it filled up and then settled. We want to look and make sure that the oil is between these two marker lines right here. It does take some time. Keeping in mind that the 2.6 is just a recommendation. It's not exactly 2.6. We go by the line instead. All right, now I'm going to burp the system. And what I mean by that is I'm going to turn the bike over. That gets the oil pumping through the engine, gets it into the filter, and then we can look at the sight glass, make sure it's at the right level. And we're good. Also included in the engine segment is your coolant. On the right-hand side of the motor, this is your water pump. The very bottom of it, I don't know if I can get it on camera, there's a little weep hole. If that is wet with coolant, you can put your finger under there, and if you get any coolant on your finger, that means that there is a potential seal issue inside your water pump. At 600 miles, I wouldn't think that there would be one, but I know some people have had issues with that, so be sure to check your water pump. When you're checking your coolant level, there's a little sight window on the right-hand side. If you have the crash cage, it makes it pretty hard to see, but there is an L line right about there. If you see the coolant above that line, you want to drain it out. It's excess coolant. You don't need that much. It should be right at the L. The last thing in this category is one you probably have checked while you're riding, but it's the idle speed. You want your RPMs to be at 1350 RPM plus or minus about 130 RPM. So if you're at 1500, it's a little too high and you want to turn it down. If you're at 1200, you're probably okay, but you might want to turn it up a little bit. Adjusting your idle sounds a lot easier than it actually is. There's a little set screw. I'll put an arrow to it in the picture. That needs to be adjusted one way or the other to increase or decrease your idle speed. So the next category revolves around electrical components. You've got your switches, you've got your battery, your fuses. So let's dig into that real quick. So we want to check all normal operation. Does the key actually turn on the ignition? Did the gauges turn on? This is obviously aftermarket, but it's wired into the main power of the auxiliary plugs. Do all of the switches operate the screen like they should? Do the turn signals work? Do the headlights work? Does the high beam work? Does your ignition work? All sorts of things. If any of those don't work, you'd have to diagnose a little bit further, but we're just checking to make sure things do work as they should. I also want to point out you've got a voltmeter on your main display. You can cycle through the different settings and you can find volts. You want to have your resting battery at about 12.5 volts. If it is less than 12 volts, that means you either need to plug it in or replace it. But a key thing I like to look at is the voltage drop when I go to start it. So I've got my hand on the ignition, I'm in neutral, I'm going to watch that 12.3 volts to see how far it drops when I start the bike. So it dropped to about 11.3 and then went right back up to 14. If your battery drops down into the 10 volt range, that means it's likely not charged as much as it should be, even if it's showing 12 volts at stationary. That could be that the amperage is too low to actually crank the bike over. I would recommend plugging it into a battery tender or a charger that is a floating charger, or you can take it out to get an amperage test at a AutoZone basic mechanic part shop type place. I will add, it's been about 2 weeks since I've ridden this bike because I've been focusing on other bikes and other content, but I'm not terribly surprised to drop to 11.3. I'm going to put it on a charger, but I'm also taking it for about a 200-mile ride tomorrow, so that should bring the battery back to life, I hope. I'll keep an eye on it though. The battery itself sits under the seat right here. After 600 miles, we want to make sure that those terminals are tight and torqued down. If they become loose, then you have electrical issues throughout the entire bike. I've got my saddlebags on right now, so I'm not going to take these off to remove the seat, but there's a key right here. Turn the key, seat pops up and back. You can check the terminals right there, make sure they're tight. It's not listed explicitly, but I would also recommend checking your brake light. Make sure that that functions with both your front brake and your rear brake actuators so that your brakes work to indicate that you're stopping, keeping you safe. This next category covers your brake systems. You've obviously got front and rear brakes. You've got anti-lock brakes. You've got fluids and levers that you want to check. Make sure that they're all working properly and nothing's stuck. So we're going to want to check the meat on the brake pads themselves. But in order to do that, you need to remove the little clip that's on the retainer pin. You can use a flathead screwdriver to just pop that up. It's just a little circlip. And then using a T25 Torx, you can back that out. When we remove the pin, we can rotate this back a little bit and we can see how much, see if I can get it on camera, we can see how much meat we have. There are wear marks on the pads themselves there, which will show you how much you have left before you need to replace them. And then you put it back together in the opposite direction. Tighten down the pin, put the circlip back on, the flat end facing out. You also want to check the wear on the rotor itself. Take your fingernail, rub it along the edge, make sure it doesn't have any grooves to it. If it does have deep grooves, that means that you've probably got something stuck in your caliper and it's dragging on the rotor and it's wearing down the metal. We definitely don't want that. The same goes for the back, but you don't have to remove the pads to see. You can just very easily see how thick the material is, and you can still do the same groove test on the rotor. We do want to check the level of the fluid, and I found it best to do that with a light on the back side, and you can see there's an upper and a lower level. Let me turn off the other light. All right, there we go. Now you can see where the fluid line is. It is above the lower and below the upper. That's exactly what you want to see. Take a look at the color. It should be kind of yellowish or clear. If it's getting dark brown, it's time to replace. But again, 600 miles, you shouldn't have to do that. Your front master cylinder has similar. It says max and min. You want to make sure that level when the bike is flat, when the bike is vertically up and down, you can check the max and min level to see where it's at. Add some if you need to, remove some. You shouldn't have to do either at 600 miles. Just checking to make sure there's no leaks. You also want to check that your pedal returns the way that it should. Same with your lever. Be sure to check your brake line banjo bolts too, where the crimp is, where it mounts to the caliper, the bleed screw. If you see any residue of brake fluid, that's not a good thing. We want to make sure that's clean and dry. One random thing to note is if you are riding this bike off-road, you're probably cleaning it often. Every time you clean it, you should look at these things too. Make sure there aren't issues. You don't have to wait until your 600-mile service. Anytime you clean it, touch the bolts, touch all the fittings, make sure everything's the way it should be. Tires are incredibly important, and they are one of the most wearable items on a bike, especially if you're riding on the highways and off-road. The tread, the condition, it's all very important. Let's talk about the age of tires. If you look around the tires, you'll see a 4-digit code. That is the DOT code that indicates the manufacturer date of the tire. This was the 42nd week of 2024. So this tire is not that old. I am okay with using tires up until the point that they're about 5 years old, and at that point, regardless of how much tread they have, I like to replace them just so that the rubber stays soft enough. On the front tire, I like to feel it to see if it's nice and round. If it has like a wobbling or a waffling to it, it's called cupping. That's usually an indication that your tire pressures are inaccurate, or you've got an issue with your suspension or your alignment, but you want it to be nice and round. Look around the sides for any wear or cracking. Look for pressure points, things that might be stuck in them. Again, if you take this off-road, you might have thorns or sticks or nails, something stuck in the tire. Take a look around. Again, while you're washing it, you should wash your tire, wash your wheel, and see if you have any air coming out. I've been running with the WeRideTwo tire pressure monitoring system, so I can check the tire pressures of both the front and rear wheel from my main dash. It's a very good idea to check your tire pressures almost every time you ride, especially when the climates are changing. It's fall now, at least here in the US. Temperatures are dropping, which means your air pressure is going to be lower than it was 2 months ago. Check your pressures before you go ride. If you do air down when you're going off-road, bring a compressor with you, even the little battery-operated ones, to pump it back up. CFMoto does say that they like to have their tires at 32 PSI for both front and rear. If you're running different tires, that's going to depend on the manufacturer and the type of tire itself. I run mine at about 30-30, but when I go off-road, I want to drop that down for extra comfort and traction. For the back tire, you want to make sure that it's still round this way. You won't necessarily get the same cupping you would on the front, but on the back, you'll get a flat spot here if you're riding on the highway a lot. When you're taking a look at the wheels and tires, also check your spoke tension. Using a spoke wrench, make sure you're getting good sound, a ting. If you get a sound that sounds more like plastic, like that means you have a loose spoke and you need to adjust it. Spoke wrenches can be used on these little nuts right here to tighten and loosen them. If you have a large number of spokes that have that sound, take it to a dealership that can true your wheel and make sure it's still straight and round. You've got 2 forks in the front and 1 shock in the rear, and they have oil in them and can potentially go bad, but we're looking for signs of wear. So your front forks have seals right here that hold oil in these chambers. If those seals get dirt or something stuck in them, it can damage the seal or the stanchion tube right here and cause cuts or grooves that then cause it to leak oil. We want to look at the bottom of the fork tube down here and see if there's any oil that comes off. It's on both sides, so you want to check to see that there's no oil there. You want to bounce the bike up and down, make sure there's no stiction. Stiction meaning that it doesn't come back all the way. Highly recommend setting the suspension for your weight with the sag. I haven't set the sag on this bike yet. Would you guys like to see a video of how to do that? Would that be useful? Let me know in the comments below. This is another thing you should be doing when you're cleaning your bike, is making sure that you don't feel anything on these tubes here, that it's nice and smooth. Check both sides, especially the brake side. If your fork seal starts to leak on the brake side, then you might lose the ability to stop the bike. That can be really dangerous. Moving to the rear shock, very seldom will you see any problems with this, but what you would see if something goes wrong is oil coming out of the bottom of this, and you'd see it dripping at the bottom down here. So same as the front, take your finger, wipe it along the shaft and see if there's any oil. This is just dirt and grime from the road itself. You may notice that there's actually a plastic casing around the shaft there. So there's a small skinny shaft that goes up here, but there's a plastic casing and a bushing in there. So you wouldn't even see it if it's damaged. So try really hard to keep an eye out for any type of leakage on the bottom. Remember how I said you needed to give the engine time to settle and have the oil settle down to the right level? Check this out. So I had this at the fill line, it was between the 2 lines earlier, but when it's been sitting, it's settled even more and I need to add oil to it. So when you do your oil change, make sure you give it time after you've filled it to have the correct amount in. For the record, it's only been about 30 minutes since I topped it off, so we're gonna add a little bit to it, make sure it's safe, correct level now. The 6th thing on the list is one we've actually already covered a little bit. It's your cooling system. We talked about coolant levels, we talked about checking the overflow. Now let's talk about the radiator and the fan itself. So the coolant that's in this bike is obviously motorcycle specific, but if you're looking to replace it, you want to make sure it is the OAT, the SIOAT, G30, G40, or G12++. Those are the only kinds of coolant that CFMoto says should go into this engine. If you need help with that, just take it to the dealership. They can help do that. It is more an arduous process because you got to take panels off to get to it and do it cleanly. One thing that I did not mention is that if you do notice that your coolant level is going down, check the color of your exhaust smoke. If you have any type of color to it, that's an indication. Also look in your sight glass for your oil and see if there's a different color to it. If it's getting bubbly or milky, that means that your coolant is leaking into your oil and is a real indication that your water pump seal has gone bad. So my bike from the factory came with a OEM plastic radiator guard. You can get aftermarket ones that are metal. They protect the radiator from being punctured by anything going into it, but there are still chances things could happen. So check along the bottom of the radiator, make sure that you don't have any coolant down there. If you do, that means you probably have a puncture and you need to address that with replacing or fixing the radiator itself. So the radiator fan is in the center of the radiator, right in front of the engine. It is temperature controlled, but we want to put our hand in there and make sure we can spin the fan itself. If the fan is stuck, I've heard that people get rocks or dirt stuck in there and it impedes the fan from spinning. That could then cause the bike to overheat. So make sure that will spin freely. Check your radiator hoses. They're held on with clamps. Look around the base of them for any type of calcification. That would be like a blue or a white dusting. That would mean that coolant's leaking out and drying. You've got pipes on this side and on this side at the water pump. If you're riding in traffic and you notice that your bike is getting hot but you don't feel air moving off of it, that means that your radiator fan isn't kicking on when it should. Keep an eye on your thermostat, the temperature that's on your gauge, and see how high it gets before the fan kicks on. The 7th thing we're going to look at is the steering components themselves, the handlebars, the steering stem, all of that. So on the handlebars by the mount, you've got these lines. Those lines are used to set the angle of the bar itself, but it'll also help you know if your bars have been twisted. Because if the bars twist after an accident, those lines won't be marked up in different spots. So on this one, you can use the bar mount here to see that it lines up with that T. And this one here lines up with that T. These bars are still straight, which is a good thing. If it isn't straight, we would need to address it with loosening and tightening of both the bar clamps and the triple clamps on the forks. To check the steering bearings, the best thing that you're going to want to do is lift the front end of the bike up. Now there's a variety of ways to do this, but this is what I found works well in my garage since I have this lift table. Pinch the rear wheel, put the jack underneath the engine case cover. Obviously, if you don't have a skid plate, you can't do this to the headers, but you want to get the front wheel off the ground so that you can move it freely. With the bike supported and the front wheel off the ground, you want to take the wheel and pull it towards you and see if there's any rocking movement. If you can feel it clicking as this rotates forward, it shouldn't rotate at all, but if you feel it, then you know that you need to adjust that steering stem bolt. So at the beginning I said 7-ish things. The reason I said ish is because the 8th thing on the list is to plug it into a code reader and see if there are any fault codes in the bike. I don't have a scanner. That's one of the things the dealership can do for you, but in most cases on bikes like these, it'll give you a code on the dash before you have any reason to think there is an additional code. On top of that, in that same 8th category is to check all of your cables, your hoses, your bolts, check everything torqued, make sure it's all tight and still safe for you to ride this bike. One thing is left out though, and I don't understand why. Chain tension and sprockets. I don't know why they say they don't say check it. I would check that at 600 miles for sure. Especially if it's a brand new bike and a brand new chain, that chain will stretch out. I say stretch. That chain will get to a point where you need to adjust the tension in those 600 miles, and I highly recommend taking a look at that before you get back on the bike after this first service. I'd like to assume the dealership would do that for you in that first service, but be sure to ask if you take it to some place to do it that they will look at the chain. They should say, oh yeah, absolutely. If they don't, insist that they do, please. There's a chain guard on the swing arm right there. That's a good point to measure at. What I'm going to do, the bottom of the chain is at 40 millimeters. I'm gonna raise it up and see where it's at. It's now at 8. So this is moving. This is within spec. You want that distance to be between 30 and 40 millimeters. If it gets past 40 millimeters, you will need to tighten your chain by moving your axle back. As you pull this axle back, it will tighten the chain. That was a ton of stuff to check for the first 600 miles service. I'm ready to get back on the bike and go for some more rides. I'm excited to do so. I hope this type of video is useful for you. If it was, leave a like. I appreciate all of the comments, all of the feedback that I get on these videos. I'm doing this to help you be a better rider and more self-sufficient as a motorcycle owner. I've already done a bunch of videos on this bike, the Ibex 450 or the MT 450, and I've got more coming. So here's a playlist of all the videos on that bike that I've done so far. Stay tuned to that. There'll be more videos added regularly. Oh, and let me know what other kind of videos you want to see on this bike, because as I own it some more, I'm going to have to do more work and modify things and do what I can to make this a better bike.